What do heroes do? Well, that's what we're going to find out in our next adventure with the god of thunder himself, Thor. And what better place to learn more about our hero than by finding him in action? After he has successfully rescued Asgard from the threat of the Dark Elves, Thor set out on an adventure to find himself, eager to escape his destiny of becoming the next king of Asgard. Instead, he found himself captured and trapped by a monstrous fire demon named Surtur, who claims that he is bound to bring about the prophesied Ragnarok, the end of Asgard. Surtur tells him that the key to what he needs to fulfill this prophecy lies just below the golden palace of Asgard. All he needs to do is put his crown in the eternal flame. With that information now in his hands, Thor summons his hammer and destroys Surtur with it. When he jumps through the Bifrost after this successful conquest, however, he is shocked to find that Heimdall isn't there, it's Scourge. Scourge explains to Thor that Odin, his father, accused Heimdall of treachery, and he escaped trial by fleeing. No one knows where he is. After Surtur's crown is sent off to the vaults below the castle, Thor finds Asgard to be very different to how he remembers it. At the front, there is a giant statue of Loki looking over Asgard, and he even finds actors performing a play depicting Loki's heroic sacrifice in their fight with the Dark Elves. Odin is seen lying around and eating grapes while enjoying the show. Thor immediately sees through the lie and reveals to everyone that Odin is actually Loki, disguised as their father. He demands to know what happened to their father, and Loki then brings him to a retirement home in New York, which is now being demolished. Loki swears that he did leave Odin there safely, but their conversation is interrupted when Loki suddenly gets sucked into a portal, and all that is left is an address. Thor visits the address and finds himself in the Sanctum Sanctorum, face to face with Dr. Stephen Strange. Strange questions Thor about Loki's presence on Earth, mostly because Thor knew that Loki has caused great devastation on Earth. It's Strange's job to prevent people like him from coming back. After multiple space jumps throughout the sanctum and a lot of spilled beer, Thor tells him that they were just looking for their father. Strange tells him that he's in Norway, and he could take them there with a spell. But where is Loki? Well, Strange opens up another portal, and out comes Loki, who has apparently been falling for half an hour before Thor even remembered him. The two get to Norway, and sure enough, Odin is there, but not for long. After shaking off Loki's spell, he went to Norway, and there, with his sons, he admits to them that he is at the end of his life. And with his expiry comes a much larger loss. Apparently, upon his last breath, the prison that was holding back his true firstborn child, Hela, will be no longer, and Hela will be free. She is absolutely dangerous, and much like them, she draws her power from Asgard. It's all she needs before she is able to fulfill her mission. And sure enough, as Odin passes on into a million sparkling ashes, behind them, another portal opens, and out comes a tall, imposing, and terrifying woman. It's their sister, Hela. She tells them to kneel, and when they refuse and attack her, with Thor even throwing his hammer at her, she reveals that she is much, much more powerful than they think. She catches the hammer easily and breaks it like glass, just like that. Loki, after seeing that they do not stand a chance against her, demands that they be taken to Asgard through the Bifrost, much to Thor's protest, as he knows what's coming. Sure enough, Hela takes the portal too, and then throws Loki and Thor out at different points in the journey through the Bifrost. Thor and Loki kicked out of the Bifrost. Hela easily enters Asgard. Upon arrival, she swiftly ends Volstagg and Fendrel. In the midst of this chaos, Scourge, who is now demoted to janitor, gets recruited against his will by Hela, and in his fear of her, he obliges. Hela heads straight into Asgard, and there, she easily wipes out the entirety of the palace guards single-handedly, including the brave Hagon. As all this chaos is going on in Asgard, where is our hero, Thor? Well, after being thrown out of the Bifrost, he finds himself dumped through a portal into a planet that looks more like a landfill than anything. He is immediately surrounded by scavengers, who trap him in a net easily, given that he no longer has his trusty hammer with him. Luckily for him, a woman comes to his rescue. Far from the damsel in distress we are used to in hero stories, this woman arrives very, very intoxicated, in an artillery spaceship, and wipes out the scavengers easily. Just when Thor thinks he may finally be saved, however, she uses a device called an obedience disc on his neck, which she uses to shock him until he passes out. Thor wakes up strapped to a chair, and is introduced to the Grandmaster, an eccentric man who runs the violent, lawless land known as Sakaar. He is delighted with what the woman, Scrapper 142, has brought him, and decides to put him up against his beloved champion fighter. As all this is happening, Thor spots Loki in the crowd and calls him over. Loki tries to shush him, before telling him that he has been there for weeks, given how fast time moves in Sakaar. Unlike Thor, Loki found favor in the Grandmaster, and even pretends not to care about Thor in order to preserve his position. Thor gets thrown into a dungeon, where fighters are kept for the entertainment of the bloodthirsty crowd. There, he meets Korg and his friend Meek. Korg tells him that everyone who has ever faced the champion has been destroyed, but Thor remains adamant that he can take this guy on. Meanwhile, back in Asgard, Hela takes a visit to the throne room. She looks up, sees the history of Asgard on the fresco above the throne, and is enraged with how Odin tried to cover her up. With that, she throws some of her huge daggers at the fresco, revealing the true history of Asgard's so-called benevolent rule of their kingdoms. It came from Odin and Hela violently conquering the 9 realms before she got too ambitious, and Odin had to lock her away. Speaking of being locked away, in Asgard's vaults where Odin's treasures are kept, she walks past the Tesseract and Surtur's crown, until finally, she comes upon the Eternal Flame. With the power of the Eternal Flame, she restores her entire army, including her giant wolf, Fenris. With her army alive, she heads forth for her mission to conquer more realms. She heads straight for the Bifrost, but is appalled to find the sword that activates it is gone. Heimdall, once a fugitive on the run, has taken it, and has been keeping the hills around Asgard safe, so that escaping civilians can take shelter in the hidden stronghold there. Back with our hero, Thor is not happy at all with his arrangements. After quickly finding out that there is no easy way out of the dungeon, he sits there, miserable, when an apparition of Loki appears to talk to him. He doesn't want to listen, and instead throws rocks at it until he goes away. Not long after, he is brought out to get ready for the battles outside. He spots Scrapper 142 drinking at the bar, and Korg remarks that she is actually Asgardian. He tries to reason with her, but she refuses to listen, until finally, it's his turn out on the ring. After all of the terrifying build-up to this, Thor is absolutely ecstatic to see this champion. Why? Because it's none other than his good friend from work, Bruce Banner. However, he is just the full-blown Hulk at this point. As Thor tries to talk to him, Hulk just smashes him around. When tries to use Natasha Romanoff's technique to calm Hulk down, it doesn't work, and he just ends up hitting him against the ground. Thor, understandably, stops holding back at this point, and he even has a vision of Odin that causes him to channel raw lightning without his hammer. Just as he is about to win against Hulk, however, the Grandmaster, eager to keep his champion's reputation, uses the obedience disc to shock Thor. With him on the ground, Hulk flies into the air to smash him. As he descends, Thor holds up a hand in defense before everything blacks out. Back in Asgard, with the sword of the Bifrost gone, Hela rounds up the remaining people to demand its location. At this point, she has recruited Scourge to be her executioner. She orders him to execute one random person until someone tells her where the sword is. Just as he is about to lay down the axe, one of the townsfolk speaks up and tells Hela the location of the hidden stronghold. Meanwhile, Thor awakes in Hulk's bedroom. He speaks with the Hulk privately, and Thor asks him how he got there in the first place, and as it turns out, just outside the building, the Quinjet is still in one piece. Thor tries to convince Hulk to come with him and defend his home, for old time's sake, but Hulk demands that he wants to stay. The two exchange some hurtful words, but eventually make up. But he is still trapped on an alien planet, so he calls out to Heimdall for help, who heeds his call and speaks with him, telling him that Hela is going to slaughter everyone if she gets her hands on the Bifrost. Asgard needs him. Thor asks Heimdall how he can get out, and he tells him to take a portal out of the planet, but not just any portal. He needs to go through the biggest one. With that, the Hulk invites Scrapper 142 over, and when she arrives, Thor tries convincing her once again that she should help him, but she refuses. He then sees her tattoo and realizes that she was actually a Valkyrie, a legendary all-female group of warriors that were sworn to protect the throne. He tries to use this to get her to help, but she still denies him. The two exchange a few blows, and Thor then uses this opportunity to pickpocket the controller for his obedience disc from her. He uses it to take the disc off, before escaping Hulk's room. In the Quinjet, Thor activates it, but behind him, Hulk follows and demands that he stay in Sakaar as well, effectively smashing the thing to pieces. Before it's completely totaled, however, Thor accidentally plays a recording of Natasha Romanoff's final message to the Hulk 2 years ago before he left on the Quinjet, causing the Hulk to transform back into Bruce Banner. With Bruce back, Thor catches him up on everything. Turns out, his last memory is of Sokovia, and he is absolutely horrified that Hulk has been in control of him for the last 2 years. Understandably, he kind of freaks out. He absolutely doesn't want to transform into the Hulk again at this point, because it could mean that he is never coming back. Anyway, with the Hulk gone, the Grandmaster orders a search for Thor and his beloved champion. He employs Scrapper 142 and Loki to find them, and just before the two head out, Loki also learns that she was a Valkyrie, and forces her to remember repressed memories of their fight against the biggest threat to the throne yet, Hela. Everyone lost their lives, except for her. This angers her, and she knocks him out. But as much as it triggers some really unwanted memories, this pushes her to help Thor out. She finds them, and joins his team. She presents him with a peace offering in the form of his brother. As the Valkyrie, Thor, and Hulk brainstorm ways to get out of Sakaar through the huge portal known as the Devil's Anus, Loki speaks up. Wanting safe passage out of Sakaar, he bargains with them that he has access codes to the Grandmaster's personal fleet of ships. The three reluctantly accept the offer. As Valkyrie frees and arms the prisoners for the revolution against the Grandmaster, Thor and Loki head down to steal a ship, and the two have a talk about their relationship as brothers, which noticeably softens Loki. But even with all that mushiness, Loki still reveals that he plans to betray Thor. As he attempts to signal the alarm, Thor reveals that he already anticipated his betrayal and had secretly placed an obedience disc on him. He shocks Loki and throws the controller far away from him before taking the Grandmaster's most prized ship, which he uses to escape together with Hulk and the Valkyrie, leaving Loki behind. They arrive in Asgard, finding it in chaos. Luckily, Heimdall was actually able to escort the people to the bridge of the Bifrost. However, they soon find themselves backed in between Hela's forces. Banner hesitantly transforms into the Hulk and fights off Fenris, while the Valkyrie uses the ship to shoot down the enemies on the bridge. Meanwhile, Thor attacks Hela in the throne room, but with Hela deriving her power from Asgard, she is still too powerful for him, and even loses an eye in the battle. With Hela absolutely destroying him, he has another vision of Odin, who reminds him that he is the god of thunder. He doesn't need his hammer. As Hela reminds him that she is the goddess of death, Thor summons lightning and lets her know painfully that he is the god of thunder. With Hela temporarily out of the way, Thor heads over to the bridge to help Heimdall and the Valkyrie fight off Hela's forces, but they're just too many and there is no way out. Just in time, however, something arrives in the distance. It's a huge ship, and on it is Loki. Turns out, as Korg was leading a bunch of folks from Sakaar, he headed down to the Grandmaster's vault of spaceships, where he pressed the controller for the obedience disc on Loki. With that, Loki led them, and they all took the largest ship the Grandmaster had, and used it to head to Asgard. Now in the battle, he helps the Asgardians to safety by boarding them onto the ship, before joining forces with Thor, Valkyrie, and Heimdall. In his vision, Thor also learned that to protect Asgard, he just needed to keep his people safe. This helps him realize that the entire point is not to stop Ragnarok from happening. Since Hela derives her power from Asgard itself, they need to spark Ragnarok. Despite it being an extremely dangerous and destructive move, Loki still heads straight for the vaults beneath the palace, just as Hela arrives. As the rest of the gang try to bring her down, to no avail, Loki takes Surtur's crown and uses the eternal flame to bring life to it. He escapes and reunites with Thor, Hulk, Heimdall, Valkyrie, and the rest of the Asgardians, and the escaped Sakaar prisoners, just as Surtur comes to life as a giant fiery monster, hellbent on destroying Asgard. Hela realizes what's happening and tries to attack Surtur, but he easily defeats her with his sword, as the survivors fly away in the ship. With their home completely destroyed, Thor recognizes the need to prevent his people from going extinct. With that, he finally faces his destiny and takes on the role as their leader before they all head for a course to Earth.